pumpkin people, Cindy here. Right now it is 11:45, overcast, 57 degrees. In the greenhouse next door it's 74 degrees. Yesterday I showed you how to train and prune your vines. So do you think we're ready to bury some vines? No, we are not ready to bury vines. That was a trick question. We never want to bury vines this early in the day. We want to wait until the sun is out. The greenhouses have heated up maybe 10 degrees more, so those vines are nice and floppy and they're not going to be at risk for breaking. So that was a trick question. We're going to wait. I'm going to probably bury vines this afternoon and I'll show you how to do it. Right now, I'm going to go for a run. I'll see you in a bit. Hey pumpkin people, Cindy here. I'm back. It's the afternoon. Look at that blue sky behind me. It's probably 70 degrees outside, and in the greenhouses it's about 84. Perfect conditions for burying vines. So you ready to get dirty with me? Let's do it. All right, I'm in greenhouse number 1. It's 81 degrees in here, and I'm working on the 2030 Toeback squash. Look at this big beauty. I've got the vines trained. These secondaries are sweeping back. Right there's the crown of the plant. And so they're in a trench. Yesterday they were pruned and trained. Today they're going to be buried. I'll show you how I do it. Alright, if you didn't watch yesterday's video, whenever I'm working around the plant, pruning or burying, I like to have 2 foam mats. And so I've got walk boards leading into the patch. I walk, I drop my mats off right next to each other. I will kneel or sit on this one and work on that vine, and then I'll grab this one, move it over, and I'll work on the next vine. And I grab the mat behind it and move it. And so I'm able to move all the way around the plant, just kneeling around the vines without ever compacting the soil. So grab a couple of those, and then for today's vine burying mix, I have got a cup of bone meal and a cup of mycorrhizae inoculate. So you can see I've previously buried some of this vine here, and you want to be careful that your flowers are sticking out. The tendrils I'm not pruning off this year, just because I think the less cutting you do on a plant, the less of a chance of introducing pathogens into the plant. So I'm just going to leave them. It's worked out well for me the last couple years. Here are a couple flowers. I'm going to be mindful to keep those uncovered by the dirt at every junction. Now notice this vine tip is up a little bit. I never really want to force anything down. I notice right here it's raised. I could dig this out a little bit more where it's raised up, and then that will lay down a little bit better. I'm not going to bury clear up to this leaf junction here, because that will just invite the vine tip to grow straight up. And so I'll probably bury just to this leaf junction. All right, so what I do is I just grab a little bit of bone meal, sprinkle it along the trench. Bone meal is high in phosphorus and it's organic. It's not going to burn the plant. And then I grab a handful of mycorrhizae and I sprinkle that along the trench. You can add all kinds of things to your trench mix. Sometimes I add nothing at all, but I'm going to add these 2 things this year. And then I'm going to water in with some other things. So I've got my trench filled with some good stuff. And now I'm just going to take my soil that I mounded up when I was digging that trench. I'm going to cover it up. And I'm going to be really careful to make sure those male flowers are sticking out. And of course, I already covered up a male flower, but I'll find him. I'll find him somewhere. Oh, there he is. Make sure he's sticking out. All right, we are buried. Next thing we're gonna want to do is water this in. Well, I was getting a little optimistic there. We're not gonna water it in just yet. I've got a lot more vines to bury. I've got this one and that one and the next one and the next one. And then I gotta work my way all the way around and do the other side too. All right, here we go. So I just move my knee cushion into place, crawl on it, grab my other cushion. Oh, you know what? I gotta grab that stuff first. There we go. Don't forget the stuff, Tobeck. Now grab my knee cushion, move it down here so I can do the next vine after I work on this guy here. Same story. I'm gonna fill the trench with my trench mix, bury it, keeping in mind not to bury any of those little male flowers because we might need those for pollinating. All right, we've come to the main vine tip. I lifted off the protective cage and I'm gonna bury this main vine. Notice that I have my soaker hoses laid over the top of it. I've got the trench mix in the trench. One thing I need to do is I need to move these walk boards because this thing's growing pretty fast and I need to continue trenching in front of it, maybe a good foot. And so I'm only going to bury it to about here. And not only do we need to be very mindful of the male flowers, but even more important, we need to be mindful of these secondary leaves that are forming, these buds. This is a meristem bundle here, and we do not want to get that covered up at all. And so we need to be super careful. Let me show you what it looks like after I bury the main. Okay, so we are all buried. Notice that I extended the trench. I moved the walk boards out of the way because it's growing so rapidly. I'll put the cage back on a little bit later to protect it. I didn't bury the whole thing, but notice that where I did bury, I was super careful to keep the meristem bundle for that secondary vine exposed, as well as the male flower at every leaf junction. We do not want to bury those under the dirt. So in yesterday's video, I talked a little bit about why we bury the vines, and here is a great example. If we look at this leaf junction, there are two spots here that are going to root out. There's one on top of the vine, and if I lift this up, you can see underneath the vine that's already starting to root. And so if we get this covered up and moist and dark, it is going to root along with the one underneath, and that's going to do a few things. It's going to help anchor this plant down into the soil, which is always a good thing, especially if you get some wind. And the second, probably more important thing, is it's just going to provide more roots. We are also going to form a symbiotic relationship with our roots from the plant and the mycorrhizal fungi that we're putting down in the trench. And that's just going to create even more water uptake, more nutrient uptake, and hopefully a bigger pumpkin. All right, we've got everything buried on that plant, and now it's time to party. So I've got inside of here my different things that I want to water those roots in with, those vines in with, to cause rooting, because if you just bury the vines, that's not going to necessarily get those roots to activate. The soil has to be moist. And so I'm going to water them in just with a hose and sprayer. In the receptacle here, I've got some root shield wettable powder, some azos, some fish hydrosolate, some humic fulvic acid, and some powdered kelp. And so this is what I'll be watering them in with. Now, I think it's always a good practice to test and see anytime you put anything on your plant, especially something that's going to come in contact possibly with the leaves, what parts per million you've got, because you don't want to burn your leaves. And so I'm going to use my ppm meter here and just stick it in this solution. You can see it's full of that stuff there, and it is reading between 100 and 200 parts per million. So 100 and 200 parts per million. Yeah, so it's probably about 150 parts per million when it flashes between the two numbers. You probably see that flashing right there between the 100 and the 200. So about 150, which I think is great. So let's water this in. All right, so I just used that hose and sprayer. It's okay to spray the leaves with this stuff. We just tested it. In fact, the leaves will probably be kind of happy because right now it's 91 degrees in this greenhouse. This is all fine for the leaves, but another thing, these leaves kind of funnel and channel that water down right into the junction where that rooting takes place. And so they're going to actually help target that water. So get the entire plant, and then you will be ready to bury again in 4, 5 or 6 more days. On and on and on, probably through the month of August. So let's talk about some of the things I put in this water and why. I've got the root shield in there. That's a beneficial, and it's going to prevent disease. I've got the azos in there. That's another beneficial bacteria, and that's going to help fix nitrogen from the air and make it available for the plant roots. The fish hydrosolate and the humic fulvic acid are things to feed the microorganisms in the soil, which will in turn form relationships with the plant roots and help feed the plant. So it's that whole soil food web notion going on there. Hey guys, I hope you learned something useful today about how to bury your vines. There are lots of different techniques for doing it. This is the way that works best for me. I've been growing for quite a few years now, and I like this way, and I know that where I live in the Pacific Northwest, I don't get a lot of issues with vine rot, whereas people in different parts of the country who are dealing with higher humidity situations with warm weather, that might be an issue. And so if you feel like you can bury vines where you live, maybe try this way out, and I think you'll be happy with it. Happy pumpkining. I'll see you next time.